Okay, let's clarify how to create these animations that we were attempting to do in class today, where we start with an object in our Unity hierarchy that has pieces like the arms, the head, the eye, etc. If you wish to have an animation that can control this character, start with the object highlighted in the hierarchy and then open the animation window, and it will prompt you right off the bat that says, hey, you need to create an animator and an animation clip for this object. If you now hit create, it's going to ask you what do you want to call it. I'm going to call this idle robot to start with. And this will be creating the clip for the idle animation. You can see that robot is now I can now add properties, and it's going to give me all of the properties that are associated with the object in my hierarchy that I originally selected. And so you'll notice that I can expand out the body, and we're going to give this idle animation for my character the eyeball. The pupil will just pulse slightly. So if I say add property, I have to go find that pupil. So if I expand out my hierarchy, here's my pupil. And one of the things I can use are the properties of the transform, which would involve position, rotation, or scale. So I could have the position of the pupil slide back and forth. I could have it rotate, etc. But for me, I'm going to just go with scale. I now have that as an available property in my animation. So my animation can now control those properties. These are keyframes. So at the initial keyframe, the scale is 1. So I'm going to go to the 30 mark of my animation, the halfway mark, and I'm going to add a keyframe using this button here that says Add Keyframe. Um, and I'm going to click that, and I've now got a new keyframe that has those properties associated with it. So I'm going to scale this to 0.9 in the X and 0.9 in the Y. So at that moment in the animation, it will be 9/10 of the size it was at the beginning, and then it will return back to that final 1 again. I can now preview this by clicking the play animation button, and you'll notice the eye is just pulsing back and forth. This is my very simple panic or idle animation. We can control more properties than one at a time. We could control how his arms are swinging, how his body's moving up and down, etc. Then that will be what I will ask you to do in homework, is to make a more complete idle animation. We can also add additional clips. For example, we can pull down on this idle animation menu and we can pick create new clip. It's going to ask me for the name of the new clip, and I'm going to call this one Panic Robot. And I am again back to the blank animator, and I can now add properties. So in my case, I'm going to again use the eyeball. So I'm going to add the eye sprite renderer for the eye. And under sprite render, I'm going to add color. So I'm going to change the background color of the eye. And I think I might do the same thing with the pupil. So I'm going to add the property of the pupil, body, head, eye, pupil. I'm going to grab both the scale again so I can make it a little bit smaller. And I'm also going to add the pupil color, sprite render color. All right, so here's my animation. So I can add that keyframe again, but I'm going to work right off the bat. I'm going to say right at the start, the pupil's going to get to be, say, 60% of the previous pupil size. Um, but I don't want it to go up and down like that. So what I want is I want to go back to my initial keyframe. Here's my initial keyframe. If I go to my next keyframe, which is this one, you'll notice that those values have gone back up. But what I want is the scale to not change. So I'm going to go in here with those two scale items selected, and I'm just going to tell it to remove that key. So it's no longer going to mess with the scale in a later keyframe. So now if I hit my play animation, it just stays smaller the whole time. So when he goes into panic mode, his eyeball just focuses down. Now, that's not a very fun animation, so I'm going to go to the sprite renderer of the eye, and I'm going to change the color. And so I want to go back to my keyframe, and I'm going to change the color to mostly red. So maybe something like this. So his eye gets bright red, and again, this will pulse between 0 and red and white, but it turns around too quickly. So I think I want it to pulse from white to red like a warning. So I'm going to go back to that keyframe at the beginning. I'm going to change these values back to 1s. And then I'm going to go in the middle here, and I'm going to add that keyframe again. I don't want it to mess with the scale of that pupil. So again, I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to double click so I get just those selections, and I'm going to right click and pick delete keys. So it's not going to mess with that. And I'm going to change this one to the red. So I'm going to go back in here and maybe make this 0.3 and 0.3. Now if I run this animation, it kind of does like a warning, danger, Will Robinson. All right, so that looks pretty good, but I don't want his pupil to be blue against the red. I think I'd rather have it focused down and change to black. So I'm going to go back to my first keyframe again. I'm going to run out my color of my pupil. I'm going to change this to black, which would be 0 red, 0 blue, 0. You'll notice it's now black. And again, I don't want those colors to change, so I'm going to delete the keyframe here, and I'm going to delete that keyframe here. So it's just going to switch to black at the beginning of this animation and stay that way. If I hit play, I get now this particular warning state. All right, so those are my animations. I now can close that, and you'll notice I have the panic robot animation and the idle robot animation created.